Welcome back, everyone. And I'm very glad to say that we're here with Kimberly Ortiz. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, Sally, and hi, everyone. I am really excited to be here with y'all today.
This is Kimberly's inaugural time on the podcast. So she told me she's very excited because she's been listening to it, which as a host, of course, I love hearing. So thank you so much. All right. So we're going to be talking about supplemental essays today. So let's start with kind of what are they? I mean, most of our listeners are going to know, but maybe you could give kind of just a brief explanation.
Yeah, this is a really great question, Sally. And to everyone hearing today, listening to us today here, I like to say that the supplemental essay, a school is asking you specifically a question, right? So this is my first important reminder and pointer to the student and the prospective applicant, really thinking about when the school took the time to ask you a specific question. So I always tell the student, you should also take the time to respond to it and give a quality response, right? My second layer to this of what is the purpose of a supplemental
Hmm.
essay, I always tell students, Sally, that a supplemental essay is the place where you get to directly talk to a school. So I always tell students, think about what is that authentic perspective, interest, anything that you really want to bring to the table that is specifically going to talk to a school. So my last thought here is that I always tell students, think about how you're going to add to that community that you're talking to. And I think this is really what you can do and what is in your power when you are talking directly to a supplemental question and responding to it.
Okay. So So what, I mean, what can students do? Well, actually, let's back up. Let's give, like, obviously we're not here just to talk about your institutions, but for example, just because you're coming right out of and I love having someone with your recent experience on. So like what is an example of a question, a supplemental question that Harvey Mudd might have asked or Caltech might have asked?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think similar to many other institutions out there, I personally like the why Harvey Mudd College or why any school. And this is where my tip comes in. One of my tips of the day, not just for Harvey Mudd College or any of the schools I've personally worked for, but any other school. I come from mission-driven institutions, and I would say that a lot of schools out there are also mission driven. So,
Mhm.
my number one tip when we are thinking about the why a specific school, I always like to tell students look at the mission of a school. I think this is a really, really great place for students to start, especially if you're feeling stuck or if you haven't gotten the opportunity to visit a school. That is totally okay. But again, there are resources out there. And my number one tip of the day, again, is to look at the mission. Look at the mission of a school and really identify why is that mission speaking to you, and going to my original thought. Really think about how you're going to add to that mission and really center that idea and those perspectives when you're responding to a specific school. I would say that that is my number one tip when we are thinking about mission driven institutions and again how you're going to contribute and add to those schools.
Hmm. And I really think, I mean, you say most or many, I would say all schools have some kind of a mission statement. Like they think about it, they use it as a guide when they're developing curriculum. So I actually loved that. And honestly, like I don't always remember to tell students that. So I thought that was such a great thing to think about. I talk to students about, trying to understand what the school is, but you're right. You can go directly to the mission. It's always on the webpage under, like, you can go to about, and usually they have the mission on there, you know? So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So how might someone incorporate the mission in? Like what's an effective way to incorporate that in? Because obviously they don't just want to quote the web page. Like that you don't want to do. Nor, by the way, this is a little bit off topic, but what I see with a lot of students is that they kind of just want to say, well, Harvey Mudd or Caltech or whatever the school might be, is one of the best schools in the country. It's like, you know what? They already know that. But there's a lot of great schools in the country. So what is it that makes this school a little bit different, right? And so kind of like let's dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think this is where it goes back to being specific. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something very, very important. And you will hear that not only from myself or Sally, but I think anyone you talk to in
Mm-hmm.
our team. Being specific, I think that's the number one tip here and idea. In particular, Sally, what I personally like to tell students and I challenge them to think about a lot of the times I see students being specific about spaces such as a lab and they say, I really want to work in this lab. And they're being specific, right? And that's awesome. You're obviously doing what we're asking you to do. You're being specific about a lab. But I always tell students, let's go deeper. Are
Mm-hmm.
you only interested in that physical space? Or what else excites you? What else is different about a place like Harvey Mudd College, like Caltech, like any other school? A lot of the time I see students forget about addressing the community members and
Mm-hmm.
not only saying this is a really outstanding lab space. And I tell students, okay, that's awesome, but what about the community members? What are the scientists there? What are the faculty there? What are the students there that are going to help you to your development and that innovation that you want to bring forward? So I would say be specific, but most importantly, think about going deeper than just highlighting one location or a space on a particular campus. Really think about why you specifically want to work in that space. And here in this example, Sally, I'm bringing and I'm calling out community members. So I would say that that's where my biggest advice goes here about being specific.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, how is this going to connect you to your goals? And the other thing that I want to specify with this is that then it seems to me that a lot of students go to, well, I want to be a doctor. So I want to, it's like, no, but what are your intellectual goals in the moment? Or if you don't like the word intellectual, that's fine. How's this going to help you learn what you want to learn? Right? How does this connect you to things that you're curious about? Would you agree that that is important? Because that was always really important to me.
Yes, Sally. I love the word intellectual curiosity. I know you said some students don't like intellectual, some students might like curiosity. In
Mm-hmm.
my terms, I use intellectual curiosity. I think
Mhm.
that every single student, regardless of what you're interested in studying, has a authentic intellectual curiosity perspective, right? You love to learn and you want to achieve something that is very different to you, Sally, than to me. So
Mhm.
I would say really center that, right? When you talk to a college coach, we always ask you what is authentic about you, and I think this really goes back to this idea also about intellectual curiosity. Those are the things and the perspectives that you really want to learn about, that you feel challenged, that you feel excited, you feel passionate about it. Tell us that. Don't just say, I want to be a doctor. Really dive deep and exactly what you're saying, Sally. Really talk about those curiosities, really talk about why you want to be a doctor. So I totally agree with that thought, Sally.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, let us in on those moments that have just been where you've been fascinated by something, you know? When I talk to students, I find that often they're like, "Well, what am I supposed to say?" Or "How am I supposed to be original?" And I'm like, you don't have to be original, you have to be authentic to you." And honestly, if you're authentic to you, that's how you're gonna be original. Um, so, I mean, I is that your experience as well?
Yes, that's totally my experience, Sally. I hear that perspective all the time when students talk to me either when I was in the admission side or now that I'm a college coach here. I think a lot of students have this pressure of thinking about a topic that's out of the box, a topic that is just very creative. And I always tell students at the end of the day, as a former admission officer, my job was to really think about the takeaway that you are bringing forward, right? So I always remind students that is most important here. Again, we just shared about intellectual curiosity, right? But really think about those takeaways. Do you want readers to know that you are someone that's innovative, that you're someone that really cares about the impact that you're going to have in the world, someone that's collaborative, right? What are those takeaways? What do you want that reader to know about you and take with them? I would say that that is more important than really coming in with this pressure and this idea that you really have to have this formula or this big, authentic, out of the box idea that you want an admission officer to know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I'll even tell students, like, you can, if you visit, if you're lucky enough to visit, you can even kind of talk about your experience of sort of the vibe, is what a lot of my students call it, or just that sort of general experience. Like, what, did the campus feel exciting to you? If so, why? What kind of conversations did you have? Like, you could even talk about how you overheard students arguing about something in a fun way that you found really interesting. I mean, those kinds of details can actually be sort of what makes this essay the most interesting. I mean, I worked at the University of Chicago, and I think that students, everybody knows we had higher than a normal percentage of incredible writers. University of Chicago actually invites some really original essays. And so students would think that our Why Chicago essay had to be really original. And I was like, no, I just want you to know that you understand Chicago,
Hmm.
and why you want to come here, and that it's not just
Hmm.
because it's prestigious.
Hmm.
So, yeah, like that, so that's a I mean, we had great sciences, but that's not a STEM institution, but it's the same, right? Like we all had the same goals. So,
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Sally. Yes, I totally agree. Regardless if we're talking about Harvey Mudd or any other institution, the goal is the same. So yes, totally agree.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, is there any, like, do you have any examples? I mean, you did talk about not just talking about the lab space, but also talking about students. Was there anything else that sometimes students would do to make those essays particularly strong? Anything else you can think of? I know it can be tough to sort of think back, but.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it really goes back to also being an active community member. So I like to say, I know that this is a lot of big pictures, and it doesn't mean that what I'm saying is a checklist for the students
Mhm,
listening. I think I always tell students, think about it holistically, right? So I would say that if an essay that's effective or an essay that has stood out to me is this idea of not only thinking about an institution similar to what I said, of it being a physical space where you're going to come and do research or STEM or whatever topic you want to do or study in an institution. I think it really goes back to thinking about who are you going to be as a community member.
mhm,
I think a lot of the times, again, students stray away from that, and they stray away from thinking about not only am I a student academically, but I'm also going to be a community member. So really highlight how are you going to be an active community member, right? So how are you going to, do you aspire to engage with clubs? Do you aspire to bring that specific curiosity or interest of yours and bring others along with you and say, hey, come and learn with me? Do you aspire to do that within that institution or the surrounding community? So I would say really think about not only who you are academically, but also think about who you are as a community member and who you aspire to be. I would say that that is when we talk about holistic admission.
mhm.
That's very important as well. And again, I found that a lot of students strayed away from that, and I would challenge students to do that a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's kind of interesting talking to you because I think this is also a particular kind of Harvey Mudd and Caltech issue because the
Mm,
students are so academically focused. And sometimes if I talk to students who say are applying to like a big state school, and these are wonderful places academically, but they also might be known for football games. And so a lot of the students that I worked with would start off with, I attended a football game and I loved it. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but let's start with the academics because that's why you're going to college first and foremost. The other thing too that I think is important to note is how the question is phrased. Is it why this school overall? Or sometimes schools really are just saying, tell us about the academics. Tell us why this major interests you. And then I think you want to like focus in on that. So
exactly,
answer the
Sally.
question. Yeah.
I, you took exactly the words from my mind. Yes, I was going to say we are giving you big idea, big picture tips here, but most importantly, answer the question. I think
Mhm.
that's what's important. There's a lot of questions out there. What are your diverse perspectives and background? The list goes on of what questions are being asked by schools. So definitely number one goal is to answer the question. And then I would say then bring these perspectives that both Sally and I are chatting about and try to think about if you are holistically responding to the question, are you diving deeper? And again, what are the takeaways that you hope someone else knows about you that they won't know if you don't tell them? That's what I
Mhm.
always tell students. If you don't tell them, they won't know. And I think this is a really great place in the supplemental essay for you to specifically cater your response to that school because you will have the personal statement, but the supplemental essay allows you to again specifically talk to a school. So definitely take advantage of that.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Yes, and you mentioned we have like a minute left, so I think it is worth touching. The most common ones are the why this college essay or why this major. We've talked about that, but there are a lot of colleges these days that are asking about kind of like a question sort of about diversity, about communities that you've been part of. And every one of those questions are slightly different, although they are overlaps. And so thinking kind of deeply about it. And I always like to assure students because they get so stuck on the fact that they're like, "I'm not really like, I'm not a minority," they'll say, "I'm not like nothing bad has happened to me." And I'm like, "That's okay. You're still a member of a community. Maybe your soccer team is a community or where the town you live in." I was just wondering if you had anything quick to kind of add to that. Community can be very broad in how it's
Yeah.
defined.
You said it perfectly, Sally. If I was telling this to a student, I always told them, as an admission officer as well, diversity is diversity of thought, diversity of
Mhm,
experience, diverse of identity, right? So it really does mean anything and everything. You could think about it that way. It really just is asking you to think about how are you diverse in your own authentic experience and perspective. So don't think about it as it being prescriptive. It's not, it's the opposite. Really think
mhm,
about who you are and why that perspective will add to a community. I know I continue to use the term adding, but it really
mhm,
is that. We're really looking for a student that's going to add, that's going to contribute. So think about how those specific unique perspectives of yours are going to contribute, and I would say that is diversity.
mhm,
It's diversity of everything. So don't be scared of really bringing who you are forward in that question.
mhm. Okay. I think that is beautifully said. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much, Kimberly. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sally, and thank you, everyone. We look forward to chatting with you in the near future.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So for my next segment, Alex Rendon, a college coach colleague, will be joining us to talk about the activity list.